Welcome to Slaughtered Sheep. I'm your host, Matt Daly of MRD Consulting, and you are listening to the Law Dog series in the Slaughtered Sheep podcast. Law Dog series showcases lawyers that have stood out in their various areas of law practice. The Law Dog series will cover topics such as contract law, employment law, corporate structures, subcontracts, purchase transaction documents, and other areas of business law and contracts. Today, we focus on the universe of criminal law, the consequences on individuals and business owners of crossing the line into the world of criminal charges, criminal conviction, and the ensuing fallout. John Daly has built a criminal law practice in the Twin Cities from the ground up with his bare hands. He's handled cases as mundane as open bottle, petty theft, DUI, and as gut-wrenching as first-degree murder and major drug trafficking charges. John represents a large swath of minority clients and has earned the trust and respect of various ethnic communities. John also happens to be my brother, and I couldn't be more proud of the good work that he does representing his clients and helping them turn their lives around. With that being said, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce the man himself, the credentialed and skilled criminal defense attorney, John Daly of Daly Defense. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Matt. Geez, I wish when I walked into court, somebody introduced me like that.
For a fee, John, I only charge $1,500 an hour for that kind of introduction.
Don King, Matt Daly, I'll take it.
There we go. John, before we get into your criminal law practice and what you do for your clients, the podcast audience wants to know about the person, John Daly. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? At what point did you realize that you wanted to go into law? And what experiences in your childhood and your early adult years shaped you for this position? John, take it away.
Sure. One of the interesting things about Matt is that we are half brothers and we're some 18, 19 years apart. By the time I was a little kid, Dad's law practice was up and running. It was very successful. And I was in Burnsville and then Egan. And I remember going in there as a little kid and just being amazed at all the books on the shelves and the secretaries and paralegals. And it just looked like something that was fascinating to me in my young age. And so I got that seed planted in my head around 3 years old that I wanted to be a lawyer someday.
3 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. All right.
Then when I went to St. Paul Academy in middle school, they made us watch To Kill a Mockingbird with Atticus Finch. And that trial scene was something that I really wanted to incorporate into my practice as a lawyer. And so college was interesting for me. I didn't really take picking a major too seriously because I knew I had grad school and law school afterwards. I just got the credits, right?
Yep.
But I guess before I go into how law school was, I guess you asked me who the person is. I've always been an empath. I've always been somebody that doesn't like to see people in pain. I've been a problem solver. I've liked logic games and math problems. I definitely have a lot of energy, a sense for adventure. Somehow when you put all those things in a mixing bowl, it turned out to be a good recipe for a criminal defense lawyer.
All good characteristics for that profession.
Yeah.
And I can testify John is one smart SOB.
Yeah.
Do not play board games against John over the holidays.
Yeah, I am the smartest dumb kid you'll ever meet. I promise you that. Anyways, I think today, my own journey, and I've never been a criminal, right? But I definitely have a lot of empathy for people struggling with their own lives. And I like to be a part of trying to help them turn that around and fix it.
And just talking to you about your practice and about some of the experiences you've had with your clients, that comes shining through that on top of obviously helping them through the criminal justice system, which is job number one. But you also appear to offer more of a friend type relationship with your clients in terms of looking at the bigger picture other than just the criminal act itself. It's more like what's going on in your life. Why is this happening? Right. And I see that with you.
Yeah, I think, with civil lawyers and even, family law attorneys and estate planning and IP law, contract law, it doesn't matter what's going on with the individual, except for the fact of how did this specific transactional dispute occur.
Correct.
Right? And in criminal law, that could be the farthest thing from the truth. Criminal law is so different than every other type of law. Number one, we don't bill hourly, right? Everything's flat fee up front for the entire case. Number two, criminal defendants are the only people that go to court that don't want to be there. So
Interesting.
when you get divorced, you're filing for divorce, or you're responding to your spouse filing for divorce.
Correct.
When you sue a company, you're starting that lawsuit, and they better respond to their best interest because they don't want a default judgment. When you're applying for a patent or
Correct.
asking somebody to draft you a will, it's all push. Criminal defendants are pulled into court. They don't have a choice. If they don't show up to court, if they don't hire a lawyer, assuming they don't qualify for a public defender, there's a warrant, they're going to jail.
Straight warrant.
Failure to appear.
On that note, for our listeners, let's talk for a minute about the difference between criminal and civil law, right? You could answer that blindfolded in a hurricane because this is what you do. But a lot of people, they understand the difference between a crime or a civil dispute in general. But from the law standpoint, what exactly does that mean?
It's as simple as looking at the caption of a case, right?
Okay.
So when you have Matt Daly versus, Tesla sold me a car when the battery exploded.
Yeah, correct.
The plaintiff is Matt Daly. The respondent is the person being sued. It's Elon Musk.
Got it.
Criminal law, the plaintiff is always the United States of America, the state of Minnesota, the state of Texas, the state of New York.
Got it.
It's the government.
Those the parties.
Yeah. The petitioner, the plaintiff is always a governmental agency.
Got it.
And then you are the defendant.
Got it.
So when you think about fees, right?
Yep.
When you are asking a lawyer to assist you with a problem that you want to bring to court, or to respond to a problem that somebody's bringing against you to court, you don't have to continue. If you don't like the price, the hourly rate that the lawyer is asking you to pay, and you don't want to pay a lawyer, you either go to the library, you do it yourself, or you give up suing. In criminal law, you're the defendant and the plaintiff's coming no matter what. And if I were to tell somebody, okay, pay me $400 an hour, we go to the first hearing and it's just an arraignment. We go to the second hearing and I look at it, I'm like, okay, now's the point where we decide if we go to trial or not. So you can assume the trial's going to be 45 hours at $400 an hour. Now you're thinking about pleading guilty to a crime based off a fee.
Got it. So that's why. Now, is it mandatory as for a criminal law practitioner that it has to be a fixed fee?
It has to be a flat fee. Now, you can do a bifurcated fee, meaning you can say, up until omnibus hearing, the fee is $2,000. If we go to trial, the fee will be, an additional $5,000. But you have to lay that out before representation.
And that's statutory. Is that statutory or
professional responsibility?
Got it. Under your professional responsibility. So is it really more ethical? Is it more the ethical guidelines?
It's hard to say, right? Because attorneys today are the only self-regulating profession in the country.
Yeah.
Right. And so is it statutory? I guess it's lawyer statute, right? But it's not something that people in the legislature get to convene about, pass bills on.
Got it.
It's the Minnesota Lawyers Board of Professional Responsibility. It's a group of lawyers that are appointed.
Put it this way. If you were a criminal lawyer in this town and you started charging hourly, I'm guessing you'd get a phone call or an email.
The client would have to be aware of everything I just said. You have to have a pretty savvy client, right?
Got it.
A lot of times, believe it or not, an hourly fee would probably work out better for the client.
Okay.
But it's just, you just can't have somebody decide whether or not they want to plead guilty based off of money.
Yeah, that's the problem. They might short themselves. They might short their freedom or whatever. I'll do a few extra years if I could save some money in legal fees. That doesn't make sense.
Or just even think of a low income client, right? I reviewed the video and it looks like the cop didn't have a basis to stop the guy. I tell them that. Look, this is a misdemeanor. It looks to me like your taillights weren't out, but it'll be 7 hours to draft the memorandum and cross-examine the officer. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And a lot of times the offer's no jail.
Correct.
But there's collateral consequences. Maybe your car insurance goes up. Maybe you don't get that job you want to get, right? Either way, it's much cleaner for the practice of criminal law if it's just, look, $2,000 all the way through trial. Let's see how it goes.
Got it. The bottom line is that's how it's done.
Yep.
Okay. And that's how you do it. Let's talk for a minute. We're going to weave in and out of some of the technical things about criminal law and how they might relate to small businesses. But we also want to keep focusing on John.
Sure.
Because you're the guest here.
Yep.
And I tell my podcast guests, in order for these podcasts to be successful, we got to be able to see into your soul a little bit.
Okay.
We got to know who the real John Daly is. One of the things that, and this just isn't for you, it's for any criminal defense attorney, on a daily basis, you are seeing, let's just call it what it is, the worst side of human nature, right? You're dealing with people in a manner where they've committed illegal acts.
Yep.
They may have done very regrettable, violent acts towards their loved ones.
Yep.
They may have engaged in drug trafficking, terroristic threats, whatever, right? And that's not always fun to be around on a daily basis. And so, how do you maintain your composure? Somebody comes in to your office, and within 2 seconds, they just break down and they're bawling because they know what they did. They know they're in trouble. How do you maintain your composure without getting sucked into that?
Sure. That's a great question. And I'm going to try to give you a great answer. But let's start with the fact that the average American commits 3 felonies a day. That's a fact.
The average American commits to, but is not necessarily caught.
9.99% of the time, you're not caught.
Yeah. But just so you understand, I'm not one of them, but whatever. We'll just.
Well, that's what everybody seems to think. And the one thing I learned as a criminal defense lawyer, I'm 12 years in, and every time I get a case, it seems these serious cases, some aspect of the law is availed to me that I need to read 5 or 6 or 7 cases on. Right.
Yeah,
I'm not a walking thesaurus
Sure.
of legal precedent.
Yep.
Nobody is. And if they tell you are, they're lying.
Sure.
And if I'm 13 years into this practice and I'm learning every week 5 new things about 5 different classes of felonies, I don't know how the average person can walk down the street and be certain they're not committing a crime.
Sure. Correct. The point of that is that the criminal laws are so pervasive that they touch almost everything you do.
White collar, blue collar, gang.
Yeah. Domestic.
Gender, they don't discriminate on gender or race or creed.
Yeah. They're happy to bag anybody.
As an accountant, you can commit tax felonies. You can be rich, never hit your wife, don't drink, go to church and be committing felonies.
Sure.
Federal felonies, white collar crimes. So
Correct.
There's something for everybody. And so I start there, right?
Yep.
Let's get back to your question. Somebody comes in and I got to change the first thing I say to them because I'm always like, how are you?
Yeah, correct.
And they always say, I could be better. It's the worst day of my life.
Yeah.
It's not the worst day of their life. It's just time to learn something.
Sure.
Everybody puts such a dark connotation on rock bottom. Rock bottom is an opportunity to start making changes.
Nice.
Right.
Wow.
And,
love that one. That's a good one. Very good.
But every once in a while, and I always tell people this, look, there's a 2-prong attack to this situation.
Mm-hmm.
The first prong of attack is let's figure out what's wrong with you and let's start working on it.
Yep.
In a way that also creates mitigation factors for whatever you're facing.
Correct.
And for different types of crimes, those are different types of things. If you beat your wife, you need some anger management, right? If you killed somebody while driving your vehicle intoxicated, you're going to be in trouble. But at the same time, it's time for a Rule 25 or chemical dependency evaluation. It's time to go to treatment.
Correct. That's that holistic relationship you're talking about.
Yeah. So there's that. And while we're doing that, while the case is pending, before you say a word, whether guilty, not guilty, this needs to be started, worked on, and completed, right?
Correct.
And hopefully, since you have to do it for this case, then I frame it to them like this. Look, you're going to do this for the certificate, so why don't you get something from it? Because clearly it brought you here.
Yes.
And then while they're doing all that, I look at all the constitutional issues in the case, watch all the videos, review everything. Because at the end of the day, the ideal situation is that the cops screwed up and this person fixed himself all at the same time.
Got it. Yeah. In other words, there's flaws. There's flaws in the arresting process or investigative process.
There's flaws in every process, from the stop itself. In the case of a search warrant, did they draft the search warrant on proper probable cause? Did they execute it at the right time? Did they administer the test the right way? What's the credibility of the accusing party? Who is the accusing party? What's the relationship between these people in the case? What's the motive and bias?
So there's numerous opportunities as a criminal defense attorney to find weakness in the state. You talk about the plaintiff, which is the state, right? The state or the county or the city, but there's opportunities to find weakness in their case along the way, correct?
Yeah. State has the burden to prove each element of the offenses charged beyond a reasonable doubt. You don't have a burden as a defense, right?
Got it.
All I have to do is find one element of the case that the state hasn't met that burden on, and the charge doesn't carry.
So you're working on that side of it. You're going through the facts, you're going through the police reports, all the other written evidence that's out there, testimony, and you're working on their actual case.
Yep.
You tried to either get it tossed, either win in trial or building a case for a plea, but also you're not a licensed counselor per se, but you're offering them there's no harm in offering them personal advice. Hey, listen, I'm going to help you here. You're paying me to do a job, but I'm also going to give you some advice. Let's put you on a path so that this never happens again.
Yeah.
How does that sound?
That's the first step. That's the initial consultation.
Got it.
That's the second consultation.
Got it.
When you're charged with a crime, you get a first court date. It's called arraignment. Right?
Yep.
Most of the time, when we show up at that court date, the state still hasn't sent me your discovery,
Got
your
it.
evidence, your videos, your police reports.
Yep.
Sometimes they do, but that's 25, 30 days out from when you come into my office. The hearing we have after, that's another 30 to 60 days out. That's when I start working on the case.
Got it.
Up until then, yeah, they call us counselors, right?
Sure.
Barristers.
Sure.
We're not just criminal defense lawyers that show up to court and try to.
You're above and beyond a technician.
Yeah, we diagnose people, right?
Sure.
They don't require us to take too much psychology, but what I have is an army of professional therapists that I send my clients to. My
Yep.
job is to figure out which one they need to go.
Sure. Got it. Okay. Listen, that's phenomenal. You gave us some insight into, I guess, what I would call above and beyond just your legal relationship with your client. It's the personal relationship. It's the quasi counselor, if you will, but you're a gatekeeper, right? I'm going to send you here.
Yeah.
This person or this institution is going to take care of you. Let's jump back to you and your law practice for a minute. Let's go back in time. I was at your graduation party for coming out of law school, downtown Minneapolis. It was a lot of fun. A lot of people there. We were at, what was it, pub?
That was the local. It was their little cave party room there.
Hats off to the local. They did a great job, right? 2012, but I remember it well. John gave a big speech with a microphone and knocked everybody dead. But we were all there. We were all there to support you. We loved it. And we knew you were going to be launching this career. We were there to support you. I remember talking to you at that graduation party. And I'm a businessman. I'm a consultant. I've started up a lot of businesses. And whenever I start up a business, my first thought is, how the hell am I going to get customers and clients? Yeah, if you don't have customers and clients, and I remember asking you, okay, John, are you going to work with dad, for dad? Or you got a major law firm you're going with? And you looked me right in the eye and you said, I am doing this on my own.
Yeah.
And I was brutally honest with you at the time. I said, John, hats off to you. That's great, but I do not recommend that.
Yeah.
I do not recommend you going off into this profession on your own. But clearly it's paid off in droves. You have a great practice. But here's what I want to dig into.
Yeah.
Because this is a small business podcast and we need nuggets of wisdom here.
Sure.
So we're talking about wolves.
Yeah.
You were a sheep coming out of law school. Make no mistake about it. You were not a lion at that time.
No doubt about that.
You maybe had a lion's tail, you had a few claws, but you were covered in wool. And so the couple of the wolves we talk about in the startup phase, or you talk about the credibility wolf.
Okay.
And the technical expertise wolf. The credibility wolf means that you're out there coming fresh out of law school. You know that you can practice law to a certain degree, right? You've had internships and you're a smart guy. But the truth of it is, other than maybe some very small cases, you haven't really represented somebody from start to finish. And so how are you going to convince somebody at 20 something that you can represent? How did you do that?
I'm really glad that we're bringing this back because I think this is one of the coolest things. I'll start with when you graduate. This is going to be long-winded, but I think it's worth it. When you graduate from law school, they make you wait till July to take the bar exam. So what are you going to do? Get a server job, wait the first pay cycle for your paycheck to come and then have to quit 2 months later? No. So what it does is unless you come from a trust fund, right, you're broke. You're broke.
And in debt.
And in debt. And then you take the bar in July. Maybe you pass, maybe you don't. I did. And then they don't tell you if you passed until December.
Arrogant a-hole lawyers,
Yeah.
right? Is that how that's what they do.
So you're sitting there and now you want to go be a lawyer, and you know that's what you're going to do, whatever type of law you're going to practice.
Yeah.
Except for me here that wants to have private clients, right? If you're with a firm, they'll have you sit there and do legal research and pay you while that time's going
Sure.
on. But no, I wanted to start my own practice. Now, mind you, we had the recession of 2008. I think 3 firms showed up for one candidate for on-campus interviews, and nobody was hiring you.
Wow.
You had to be a woman or a minority to
Yeah.
even get an interview at the time
Got
because
it.
it was a tax break.
Wow.
And so being the middle-class white male at St. Thomas that I was, there was no jobs.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids in my class, they didn't end up practicing law. They went into small business.
Interesting.
But I decided that I was going to start a firm. And I got a couple of my classmates that wanted to do it too, that wanted to practice different types of law. And that in itself was a saving grace, but it also was never going to be successful because when you do an equal partnership, somebody's going to bring in the business. Somebody's going to stay home and be lazy.
It's an animal farm.
Yeah.
You got the horse pulling the wagon, and then you got everybody else
Yep.
that's riding along.
So what my son's mom and my law partner for many years, Abby, and I did in December is we took our first case and we took it for $500. And it was a felony domestic strangulation of
Whew.
dad and a daughter.
Lord.
And we took that $500 and we bought a tape recorder so we could interview people. And we bought some notepads. And I think at the time, Abby had pad for some money. We were so broke.
Startup financing.
Yep. And I remember when the 4 of us bought in to start this law firm, each of us put $5,000 in, and Abby borrowed $5,000 to be paid back to the business in the future.
Mhm.
So we started this law firm for 4 people with $15,000. It got us some laptops, some office space. But we did that case out of the trunk of our car, and I still think to this day, it was the best experience representing somebody I've ever had because I had no other cases. Right?
Yeah.
This was my only case.
Yeah.
And God, we were like our own private investigators. We Sherlocked this thing, and we got this guy a misdemeanor domestic assault. He was facing 60 something months in prison. And at the end of it, he got 0 days in jail in the anger management class.
Wow.
And it was because we interviewed his entire family who had talked to the victim and she had contradicted herself.
Yeah.
And it turns out that she was a young adolescent who was on drugs and prostituting herself and was mad because her dad had some Christian morals and didn't want her doing that in his
Yikes.
government subsidized apartment.
Wow.
And so she made the whole thing up and she admitted it to one of her cousins and we found that cousin. We interviewed him,
Holy smokes.
but he had pushed her, right?
Got it.
He was very Christian, right? He was
Yeah.
an African-American gentleman from
Got it.
Chicago.
Got it.
He was 98,000 in arrears and child support.
Yeah.
And he finally came back and was willing to face the music because he missed his kids.
Mhm. Got it.
That was our first client. Then he just needed somebody. He was begging. He would have taken a rock to represent him at this
Yeah.
point in time. But after that, we started putting up Craigslist ads. And when clients would come in, there were a lot of,
i.e., are you in trouble? Do you need a criminal defense lawyer? Whatever. Is that kind of how that?
well, we said civil, family, or criminal.
Okay,
And
got
people
it.
would reach out to us. Some businesses reached out to us. I didn't handle the civil stuff, but they would come in and they'd say, God, you look fresh or you look young. And
Yeah.
How long have you been doing this? And I'd look at them and I'd say, look, here's the deal. I haven't done this. I'm brand new. But if you think about a lawyer, there's an intelligence threshold and you have to decide, is that person over it or under it? And if you find that I'm over it, understand this. Yeah, you may ask me a question and I may not know the answer, but I
Yeah.
promise you within 24 hours, I will.
Yeah.
And I'll call you and I'll let you know.
Okay. So let's stop
Yeah.
because this is a lesson right here. Because that person that walked in to your op, that was the credibility wolf. Credibility wolf took over that person and was getting ready to bite you.
Yeah.
You don't have enough experience. I can't take you seriously. I can't trust you. This is a serious incident.
Yeah.
I might go to jail. And so the way that you tamed that credibility wolf is you said, listen, number one, transparency. You didn't try to tap dance. You didn't lie to them.
Right.
You didn't say, I got the whole bunch of experience somewhere else. I can't really talk. No, you just said, listen, I'm a very smart guy and I'm resourceful. And the one thing I could do is if I don't know the answer, I'll find it and I'll find it quickly. And I'll make sure it's the right answer so that it's going to help your case.
Yeah.
That's how you tame that credibility wolf. That's a tricky situation you were in. Like I told you at your graduation party, so many words or less. That's the wolf den you were throwing yourself into.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent point right there. I like that.
And also we offered a very reduced rate. Right?
Nice.
I think in the first 6 months, we paid ourselves $1,000 each. Talk about living off nothing. And for the first 3 years, we made 28,000, 36,000,
Yeah.
37,000.
Yeah.
It was not living on top of the world.
So John, the fast forwarding a little bit, you talked about your very first case. It was $500. You went out on your own, although you did partner up with a couple of law school grads, both of them who I knew well. Over time, we talk about this kind of bell-shaped curve, right? The good old statistical bell-shaped curve. It's everywhere. It's going to be in this podcast, right?
Yeah.
This podcast is going to peak at a level of interest that everybody's going to be fascinated with. And at some point in time, it'll start to fade. And that's what our producer Will he's going to throw a water bottle at my head. So if you hear a loud clunk, we're way down. But the bell-shaped curve of your business, your revenue, clearly it was at the low point coming out of law school. But over time, that you started to climb that curve pretty quickly. And I'm guessing that one of the main reasons for that was reputation and word of mouth. Word started getting out that, hey, this young hotshot, he can get the job done. He can navigate the criminal justice system. Is that a fairly accurate description?
Yeah, that's accurate. I put it a different way. If you do a good job for clients, right? Like in personal injury law, you got to fund the first cycle, right? And when you fund that first cycle, after a year, some of these injury settlements start paying out. Then you got money for commercials. With criminal law, you can't do that. You can't scale yourself, right? You can try. I've worked with other lawyers that have tried to do that in the criminal field. And what happens is their clients get pissed off that Bill's here instead of the guy they hired.
Yeah.
And unlike everything else, this is their ass that's on the line.
Yeah.
They don't want your associate.
Yeah.
They want you.
Yeah.
So the nice thing about your income in my profession is it's not a bell curve. It is a very slow rising mean that takes off and then levels out at a high level.
Nice.
Slowly declines until you retire. And you don't have to retire until you're 78 years old if you don't want to, because it's not physically taxing, it's mentally taxing.
So it's more of a one-man gang.
It's a one-man gang.
Yeah, you're better off having a one-man gang. And when you think about it, you think about all those kind of celebrity defense lawyers.
Yeah.
The OJ case and whatever. A lot of them, they don't call it the such and such law firm. It's this guy. It's Johnny Cochran or Shapiro or whatever. It's John Daly.
It's Earl Grey. It's Fred Getz. It's Ryan Pasiga. They have young associates that they're mentoring in the practice of criminal law.
Or a good office manager and administrator.
A good paralegal's key.
Yeah, scheduler. So, John, I want to jump back into the mind of, I'm not going to say the mind of a criminal, but more so the mind of someone who commits a criminal act. And this is a small business podcast, so everyone loves to talk about criminal law, crimes. It's always very interesting. It's why it dominates the TV, right?
Yeah.
However, my job is to try to help my small business clients as much as I can, and make no mistake about it. One big, mean, angry wolf that is prowling around every small business it's that crime wolf, the felony wolf, the gross misdemeanor wolf. Make no mistake about it, small business owners. If you start engaging or you slip into any kind of significant crime, it's going to have a major impact on you as a person, your personal finances, your family, your reputation, but it could absolutely put you out of business.
Yeah.
One major stupid crime.
Yeah.
One major DWI where you get in an accident and somebody gets hurt and it's all over the newspapers and all of your clients read about it. So where I'm going with this is I call this the impulse wolf. And what I'm referring to here is I'm not referring to the impulses that habitual criminals deal with.
Sure.
Because those impulses clearly are much closer to the surface all the time. This is the average person, business owner, family man or woman, squeaky clean record, other than maybe some traffic violations, parking tickets, petty misdemeanors on open bottles when they were a teenager. But other than that, have gone nowhere near any significant crime. All of a sudden, they find themselves in the back of a squad car in handcuffs, and they're heading down to county jail. And the reason they are is because that seemingly normal person, an impulse over the wrong synapses in their brain fired, and it caused them to either throw that punch, flip the guy off, and pull over by the side of the road and ask him to get out of his truck so he could settle the road rage. It caused that person to have those 3 extra shots of whiskey and hop in the car. And this is where I'm going with this. You deal with this all the time. So you have to have drawn some conclusions. And what is it you can tell our listeners about managing that impulse wolf so that this does not happen to them?
It's real simple.
Okay.
If you want to not have negative consequences in your life, be sober and read the Bible. Those are the 2 things.
I love it.
Because I'll tell you what,
I love it.
99% of people charged with a crime, even white collar crime, alcohol and drugs are involved, right? They're not sober.
Bingo.
Right? That's it.
Wow.
When you are going to church, going to mosque, going to synagogue, having faith, going to AA,
Yep.
and aren't altering your mind state and your judgment with chemicals, this doesn't happen. The worst thing that's going to happen to you is a speeding ticket. You can't kill somebody drinking and driving.
Yep.
You can't alter your life, right? I doubt that you would slap your wife. You know what I mean? I doubt you would abuse your kids. I doubt that you wouldn't pay attention to your books. I doubt you wouldn't report your income for taxes because you wouldn't be behind on your bills. I bet you'd have more clients and more money, so that wouldn't be a problem to begin with.
John, listen, I wear my politics on my sleeve, and the last 7 or 8 years, the good Lord has helped me walk in my faith, and I try to wear my Christianity on my sleeve. And it's interesting you bring this up because make no mistake about it, I'm going to have a podcast, and the title of this podcast is going to be, Was Jesus a Capitalist or a Communist? That's going to be the podcast. And I'm going to bring clergy onto the show because my take, we'll give a little preview. Jesus Christ was a capitalist to the nth degree, because the one thing that you hear from liberals is that making a profit is evil, right? And I'm exaggerating, and this is the fringe, but there's some of that message, right? Going back to what you're saying, with my Christian faith, I love making money. I want to get filthy rich. I want you to get filthy rich. You can do whatever you want with your profits, but make no mistake about it. Think about it just from the standpoint of greed. And wanting to make a ton of money, staying off of drugs and alcohol, and read the Bible and go to church. And guess what? There's a good chance that is going to have an impact on your revenue and your profit. And it'll keep your rear end out of jail. Imagine that.
It improves relationships. It reduces stress. It reduces the amount of problems you create, the problems you have.
Yep.
It does improve your income. And honestly, self-image and depression are a real thing, but a lot of times what I acknowledge about depression is sometimes just the awareness of how you're conducting yourself and what you think about it when you experience it every day. If you cheat on your wife every day, it's hard to go home and look at her in the eye. Now, if you get drunk and cheat on your wife once in Vegas and hardly remember it and go back to not doing it, it's easier to look her in the eye. My point is that if the example of having a regular extramarital affair versus an accident or a one-time lapse in judgment, the results of continuously poisoning your body, the results of continuously engaging in activity that isn't in its purest form for your life, create self-image issues that then perpetuate those problems even more.
No doubt about it. I love your answer, your initial answer. I like this example. And so we're going to move on from that, but I hope the listeners are taking notes on that because make no mistake about it. You make the decision that you want to own a small business. It might be a law practice. In Will's case, our fantastic producer here, it might be a media firm. But the bottom line is no one is forcing you to be a small business owner. You made that decision. And so the question is, are you willing to position yourself in the best possible position to succeed? Are you willing to do what it takes to position yourself to be a successful business owner? Because being alcohol and drug free, reading the Bible, If you're a Christian or adhering to your religious tenets, if you're of other faiths, it can help you run a successful small business. And make no mistake about it, you do not want to get arrested in of major crimes if you want to be successful. So let's move on. Other wolves, we talk about the temptation wolf, and this goes back to the impulse wolf, and it goes back to being drug and alcohol free. We're talking about impaired judgment.
Yeah.
That's the one thing about drugs and alcohol. You can take someone who is normally very moral and stays within the lines, and if you pour enough alcohol into that system, all of a sudden that judgment goes out the window, and you get caught on film.
Yeah.
And at the time, guess what? That seemed like the absolutely
Best
the correct
idea.
thing to do.
Yep.
But we talk about the temptation wolf, but it is also the lure of easy money and that lucrative lifestyle. In my business, there's a lot of bookkeepers that go to jail for embezzling from their bosses. And every time when it goes to trial, what do you think the owner says when he gets him on stand and the prosecutor's asking the owner, what did you think when you found out that Mrs. Jones had taken $700,000 over the last 3 years? What went through your mind?
Couldn't believe it. I had no idea.
That's the word for word. The actual quote is, "She is the last person I ever would have suspected." And that's the quote. It's over 1,000 cases. This is Mrs. Jones, who, guess what? She's got a neighbor down the street. She's got a Mercedes. And this woman goes to Italy every year. And Mrs. Jones has never been there. And she wants to live that lifestyle. And the easiest way to get there is the owner, he's not paying attention to the books. Why should he? He's got Mrs. Jones. She sets up a fictitious vendor, starts writing checks to that fictitious vendor. It's 1,000 this week. It's 5,000 the next week. It's 50,000 on the day she got caught. That's the temptation wolf for that lifestyle, right? How often do you see that?
People are really sick deep down, right?
It can be.
Even the Bible says we're all sinners.
Correct.
And part of sin is weakness. And temptation is the indicator of weakness, because there's so much wrong with your story, right? Number one, you can always spend more time in your small business. As the owner of that small business, you can review the transactions every month if you choose. But you chose to be lazy and just say, I hired somebody to do this. To me, not to me as a person, but to that owner, that meant I don't have to engage in that part of my business anymore.
They are to blame.
Total weakness.
Absolutely.
Right. And then you have human nature itself. I want the shortest straight line, regardless of ethics, regardless of morals, to get what I want because I want it now.
Yep. And
I would be willing to bet, in my field, in my experience, my last dollar, that both of those people are drinking cocktails 4 nights a week. Probably doing cocaine and smoking weed too. Right? They're not on it.
So impaired judgment. Listen, if you read the Bible every day, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're not going to commit crimes. But if that woman had been reading the Bible and maybe picking up the actual message, right? One of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not steal. But there's a reason for it.
I'm telling you, Matt, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but in my line of work, I see what everybody really is up to, right?
Correct.
I've seen things from, I can't even get into it, but let's just say that I've seen a lot of normal people that you'd pass by at the grocery store in Delano do some foul shit. Their kids, to their neighbors, to their parents, to their bosses. And 100% of these people, this is the conclusion it's left me to form. When you use any amount on any basis of drugs or alcohol, you cannot develop a consistent, stable moral code and live by it, period.
Amen.
And I don't care if you're in a suit at the Minneapolis club having one glass of wine and driving home to your wife, you can't do it.
Yeah.
And it's proven. I got 14 years of evidence.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Listen, it's the alcohol industry. Forget about illegal drugs, just even the alcohol industry itself. That's a podcast right there. In fact, I have a podcast called The Booze Wolf. And maybe I'll have you on. It's probably a multi-guest podcast. I want to have a chem dep expert on there, but we want to talk about the Booze Wolf. But let's keep moving. We're touching a lot of great topics here. You're helping our listening audience, right? I hope everybody's taking notes, because this is about survival and then being successful. And all of these tips can help you. John, I think we're going to wrap up this first episode of John Daly of Daly Defense in the Law Dog series here at Slaughtered Sheep. You've covered a lot of excellent ground, including your childhood, the man behind the suit. You've given us a little peek into your soul. You talked about the early stages of your law practice. You was having very little money and very little experience, and yet you soldiered on and grew your practice into the formidable business that it is today. You've touched upon your faith in many instances in this podcast, which has been appreciated. We've talked about the criminal justice process, some insights into the criminal mind and criminal behavior and the consequences of such. And so I believe that we have bestowed some nuggets of wisdom upon the podcast listener and the small business owners tuning in. Next podcast, we look to touch upon the new marijuana legislation in the state of Minnesota and how that's going to impact the state and small businesses. I want to touch upon AI, as I do with every one of my guests, to see how it's impacted their industry and their business specifically. And we want to touch upon how you're leveraging technology in this criminal justice world, amongst a host of other topics that will be near and dear to our Slaughtered Sheep listeners' hearts. Once again, John, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you next time.